My name is Kang Min-jae. I am 29 years old, and until yesterday, my greatest public achievement was returning a company stapler before anyone noticed it was missing. At 2:13 in the morning, I learned that the internet had promoted me, according to several strangers with strong opinions. I was now the secret younger lover of Korea's most famous actress. I had a decent face, obviously only second to the viewer watching right now, but decent was not enough preparation for becoming national gossip. Her name was Han Seo-yoon, actress, brand queen, award winner, a woman who could make a camera flash look nervous. That night, her heels were beside my sneakers. This was the first clue that my quiet life had been legally defeated. She sat in my apartment wearing my hoodie, which looked expensive on her through no fault of the hoodie. Neither of us spoke for a while. Silence is usually my specialty. Unfortunately, she was better at it. Outside my window, paparazzi were waiting. I had never been interesting enough to be photographed before. I missed that version of myself. She asked if staying here would ruin my life. That was a difficult question, mainly because the answer had already started trending. I told her that if my life could be ruined by one guest and 2 cups of instant coffee, then it was structurally weak to begin with. She looked at me like I had said something kind. I had only performed basic damage assessment. And that is how Korea's most untouchable actress ended up hiding in apartment 403. To explain how, we need to go back 18 hours. Before the scandal, my life was peaceful in the way a spreadsheet is peaceful. Not exciting, but nobody asks a spreadsheet to explain its dating history. I lived in an old building with stairs that made dramatic noises even when no one was being dramatic. Every morning, I bought the same coffee and the same triangle kimbap. The clerk no longer asked for my order. This is the closest I had come to a long-term relationship. I worked at a mobile payments company as a risk review analyst. My job was to notice problems before they became expensive. Some people are born for romance. I was born for checking whether transaction patterns looked suspicious. My coworker Jung Tae-hoon said, "I lived like a retired civil servant." He was wrong. Retired people have hobbies. That morning, the office was whispering about Han Seo-yoon. Apparently, she had a scandal. I considered this unfortunate and none of my business. I saw her name on my phone for 3 seconds. Then I went back to work, because I was still innocent. Then, to me, Han Seo-yoon was not a real person. She was a face on screens, a perfume campaign, and the reason my mother once bought skincare beyond her budget. After work, Tae-hoon invited me to a team dinner. I declined with the dignity of a man protecting his digestive future. I walked home alone. I liked walking alone. Nobody asks follow-up questions when you walk alone. Then, I saw the wallet. A small leather object sitting on the pavement, waiting patiently to destroy my life. I picked it up because that is what a decent citizen does. Also, because stepping over a wallet feels like failing a small morality exam. I opened it only enough to identify the owner. The photo inside belonged to Han Seo-yoon. At that moment, the wallet became more famous than me. I stood there holding it, wondering whether celebrities had customer service centers for lost items. Then I saw her in the alley, cap, mask, long coat, and the posture of someone trying to look invisible while being professionally beautiful. I recognized her immediately, not because I was a fan, because her face had been printed across half of Seoul for 12 years. I returned the wallet with both hands. My plan was simple: give it back, bow, leave, and continue being unimportant. She looked at me like I might be a reporter, stalker, blackmailer, or all three in a group project, so I bowed and turned to leave. This confused her more than anything I could have said. Then the photographers arrived. Apparently, fate had invited additional staff. I noticed her hand first, not her face, not her fame, her hand. It was shaking hard enough to make the wallet tremble. I stepped in front of the camera. I did not touch her. I just became a temporary wall with office shoes. I told her there was a service passage through the next building. She had 2 choices: trust a stranger or become tomorrow's headline before dinner. She followed me. That was her first mistake. My first mistake was being trustworthy, looking in bad lighting. We entered a service corridor that smelled faintly of dust, old paint, and poor decisions. She stumbled on the stairs. I caught her by the sleeve. This was not because I was smooth. It was because sleeve was the safest available handle. We hit on a landing while footsteps passed below. My heart was loud. My face, thankfully, remained unemployed. She lowered her mask to breathe. For the first time, Han Seo-yoon stopped being a poster and became a tired woman in a stairwell. I looked away, not because she was unattractive. I looked away because staring at a scared person felt like joining the paparazzi at a smaller scale. At the back exit, I checked the street. I had no training for this. I simply watched a lot of crime dramas with my mother. She could not go home. Reporters knew her building. Hotels needed identification. Her agency was not answering. Then her phone died. A national crisis had been temporarily upgraded to a charger problem. I told her my apartment was nearby and that she could charge her phone there. Dear viewer, this was not flirting. This was logistics. She looked at me for a long second. I could almost hear her measuring whether I was dangerous or merely inconvenient. She chose inconvenient. We entered my building under one umbrella, completely unaware that one camera had followed us far enough to ruin breakfast. We climbed 4 floors without speaking. My building had an elevator. Technically, it had retired emotionally 3 years ago. At my door, I hesitated. There are moments when a man realizes his laundry chair is about to meet a national actress. She stepped inside. My apartment accepted her with the quiet dignity of a room that had never hosted anyone above middle management. She looked around, 1 couch, 1 table, 1 kitchen so small it could be intimidated by a lunchbox. I gave her guest slippers. They were clean, plain, and absolutely not prepared for celebrity feet. I plugged in her phone and placed it face down. I did not check the screen. Basic human decency sometimes looks impressive because the world is poorly managed. She sat on the edge of the couch, like she might need to escape from my furniture. I boiled water. When people are panicking, hot water is not a solution, but it gives their hands something to do. I gave her water first. Questions could wait. Dehydration had no connection to the scandal, but it was the only part I could fix. She asked why I helped her. It was a fair question. I also wanted to know why I had escalated from wallet return to celebrity shelter operation. I told her because she looked scared. She went quiet. Apparently, for someone who had heard 1,000 compliments, being told she looked scared was new. When her phone turned on, the room changed. Notifications filled the screen like tiny digital insects. I noticed her face tighten, so I looked down. Curiosity is not a personality trait. It is a security risk. She called her manager by the window. Her voice became calm enough to be frightening. Somewhere across Seoul, Oh Min-jae, the woman responsible for keeping Han Seo-yoon alive, professionally received the worst call of her week. Seo-yoon said she could not go home. She could not go to a hotel. She could not go to agency housing. Fame had many addresses and no shelter. So I made ramen. This was not a grand gesture. It was the only food in my house that did not require emotional preparation. When she ended the call, 2 bowls were waiting. She looked at them like I had performed witchcraft using sodium. She took 1 bite and froze. Apparently, instant noodles taste different when no stylist is watching. I told her crisis ramen has a special flavor, mostly fear, slightly green onion. She laughed, very quietly. It was small enough to miss, but I noticed. I was starting to notice too many things. Then her phone lit up again. This time, the screen showed a blurry photo of us entering my building. The noodles were still warm. The scandal was warmer. Seo-yoon stood up so quickly, the chair complained. She said she had dragged me into something unforgivable. I checked the window. Below the building, shadows were gathering with cameras. My apartment had gained a fan club. I disliked the membership requirements. She bowed and said she would leave. Celebrities apologize beautifully. It makes stopping them inconvenient. I stood by the door, not like a hero, like a man who had done enough risk review to recognize a terrible exit plan. I told her that leaving now would confirm the rumor, reveal her movement route, and possibly get her surrounded before she reached the street. She looked like she wanted to cry, but had forgotten how to do it safely. I gave her the couch and said I would sleep near the door. She asked why. I said someone should hear it if people tried to enter. That night, neither of us slept. She stared at the ceiling. I stared at the door. Outside, the internet kept talking. Inside, 2 strangers quietly became a problem for each other. Morning arrived, without asking if anyone had emotionally prepared for it. I woke up by the door with a stiff neck. If anyone tried to break in, I would have stopped them after stretching. Seo-yoon was asleep on the couch. Without lights, makeup, or cameras, she looked less like Korea's glass queen, and more like someone who had finally run out of places to stand. I made breakfast quietly, not because I was kind, because a hungry celebrity sounded like an advanced level problem. She woke up when the kettle clicked. For 3 seconds, she looked completely lost. Then she remembered where she was and tried to sit like an actress. The blanket disagreed. We ate breakfast at my tiny table. I had never hosted someone famous before. I was relieved eggs did not require celebrity etiquette. She tried to thank me in a formal voice. The voice was excellent. The messy hair reduced its authority. I told her it was just breakfast. She stared at me like I had done something rare. Society may be underfeeding celebrities. She smiled, just a little. Then, she hid it like smiling without permission was a contract violation. Her phone lit up. The morning news had arrived, which is another way of saying yesterday's problem had reproduced overnight. I checked outside. People with cameras were waiting near the building. My apartment was now a tourist attraction for bad people. Seo-yoon called her manager. Her voice became calm again, which I was learning meant things were getting worse. Manager Oh Min-jae came immediately. I had never met her, but even through the phone, she sounded like someone who could cancel weather. She entered the building, carrying groceries as camouflage. I respected the method. Suspicion rarely attacks cabbage. When I opened the door, she looked at me, then, at my apartment, then, back at me. I could tell I had been evaluated as furniture with pulse. Manager Oh Min-jae entered my apartment and immediately inspected the room. I had the feeling my couch was receiving a background check. She placed groceries, a power bank, and basic clothes on the table. The woman had prepared for disaster with better planning than I prepared for tax season. Then she questioned me, politely, the way a knife can be polished. I showed her my employee ID without the personal details. Even in a crisis, data privacy deserves basic respect. Seo-yoon defended me before I could answer everything. I did not expect that. Neither did my blood pressure. I made coffee for the person interrogating me. This may be why I should never join criminal organizations. My table became a crisis room. It was too small for 3 adults, 2 phones, 1 scandal, and everyone's pride. Min-jae explained. The agency's first plan: deny everything and paint me as a suspicious man who approached Seo-yoon. I considered this unfair, also believable. I have the face of a man who could be edited into guilt with poor lighting. Seo-yoon rejected it immediately. Her voice was quiet, but the room sat straighter. Min-jae decided Seo-yoon should hide here for 48 hours. My apartment had been promoted from residence to witness protection facility. I raised my hand and asked whether the owner of the residence had voting rights. Min-jae bowed and asked for my help. That made refusing harder. Formal respect is dangerous against people raised to be polite. I agreed under conditions: boundaries, separate sleeping space, no searching through personal items, and no leaving without a plan. We wrote rules in a notebook. It felt official, which was impressive for 2 people who had met because of a wallet. Min-jae handed Seo-yoon plain clothes and told her to stop looking famous. Seo-yoon looked personally attacked by Cotton. I had to go to work. Apparently, national scandal does not automatically count as paid leave. Seo-yoon stood near the hallway when I left. We both avoided saying anything that sounded like a married couple. This took effort. Outside, the photographers noticed me. I walked normally because running would look suspicious, and also because I am not athletic enough to make it convincing. On the subway, people stared. I understood. I also would stare at a man rumored to be dating Han Seo-yoon if he looked this tired. The office elevator was silent, not peaceful silent. The kind of silent where everyone has already read the same article. When I entered the office, my coworkers looked at me like I had brought a tiger to the pantry. Taehoon dragged me away immediately. Friendship is sometimes kidnapping with concern. He asked if I was really dating Han Seo-yoon. I told him it was complicated. That was the wrong answer. In romance rumors, complicated is gasoline wearing a tie. Taehoon looked at me like I had become a national treasure. I preferred his previous low expectations. My team manager called me in. The company had discovered that I existed, which was already a negative development. He warned me not to damage the company image. I wanted to ask what image. Our office mug collection was emotionally bankrupt. During the warning, my phone vibrated. Seo-yoon had asked if I was okay. I replied that I was fine. This was not fully accurate, but adults often use lies as small bandages. When I returned to my desk, people whispered from every direction. I had become a workplace podcast. I tried to focus on risk review. Instead, I kept thinking about the woman hiding in my apartment, which was unprofessional and increasingly inconvenient. While I was being treated like a roomer with employee benefits, Seo-yoon was alone in my apartment. She later told me she did not snoop. She only observed. There is a legal difference, apparently. She tried to make coffee. My kettle, which had served me faithfully for years, suddenly became a celebrity obstacle course. She spilled a little and froze. I was not there, but I respect the seriousness with which she handled minor liquid displacement. Then she watched the news talk about her, like she was not a person who had eaten breakfast 10 minutes earlier. At the agency, executives wanted a clean story. Clean, in this case, meant throwing me into the washing machine first. Min-jae refused. She was frightening enough that even morality looked professionally scheduled. Seo-yoon heard the plan. The agency wanted to call me an obsessed stranger. She stood up in my borrowed sweatshirt and somehow still looked like someone who could end a board meeting. Far away, Chairman Baek watched everything. Powerful men often enjoy scandals because they rarely have to live inside them. He made one call and told someone to keep the rumor alive. For him, my life was not a life. It was leverage. Reporter Kang Hae-rim also started investigating. She was not evil. She was worse, competent. She connected the photo, the building, and my workplace faster than I connect a printer. Back in my apartment, Seo-yoon found the note I had left. Food in the fridge. Do not open the door. Call if anything feels wrong. Apparently, the note was too normal. For someone living in a storm, normal can be suspiciously emotional. I left work early. Not dramatically. I just closed my laptop and accepted that my risk review had become personal. I returned home with groceries and the posture of a man, pretending not to be watched by 5 lenses. My neighbor asked why reporters were outside. I said there had been a misunderstanding. This was technically true and emotionally useless. Seo-yoon opened the door a crack. Then she remembered the rule and looked guilty enough to be arrested by the notebook. I reminded her not to open the door. I tried to sound gentle. Unfortunately, I have the warmth of an office announcement. We unpacked groceries together. My kitchen was not built for 2 people, especially when one of them had the presence of a red carpet event. Our hands touched while reaching for the same item. It was a small contact. Naturally, my brain held a full emergency meeting. We both looked away. Mature adults are impressive until vegetables are involved. We revised the rules: door safety, window safety, phone safety, and one unspoken rule about not noticing hand contact. That rule failed immediately. We debated sleeping arrangements. She said, I could not sleep by the door again. I said, the door had grown attached to me. She looked genuinely worried. That was unfair. Concern from beautiful people should come with warning labels. I told her the floor had supported me longer than most people. This was not a joke in my head, which may be why it worked. She laughed and covered her mouth like the sound had escaped without agency approval. We ate dinner, nothing expensive, nothing pretty enough for social media, just food that was warm and quiet. Then she asked about me, not about the rumor, not about the apartment, me. I was not prepared. Being seen directly is very different from being photographed. Outside, reporter Kang Min-jae stood below my building and looked up at my window. The internet had become a third roommate, and it had just found the address. Reporter Kang Min-jae stood below my building and looked up at the window. She had the calm face of someone about to become everyone's problem. Inside, Han Seo-yoon had just asked about my life. Outside, the plot objected. She entered the hallway quietly. Reporters and ghosts have similar work ethics. I checked the chain. It was a small piece of metal, pretending it could handle fame. Han Seo-yoon moved away from the door without being told. Our cohabitation rules had survived their first field test. Then came the knock, polite, professional, terrifyingly well moisturized. I opened the door with the chain on. This is called hospitality with terms and conditions. She introduced herself as Kang Min-jae Entertainment reporter. That meant she hunted truth, rumors, and anything with a decent thumbnail. I told her I could not comment. It sounded professional. It also happened to be the only sentence I trusted. From the kitchen shadow, Han Seo-yoon listened. I did not know this yet, which was useful because I might have become self-conscious and ruined the scene. Hiram asked if Han Seo-yoon was inside. Dear viewer, this is where a normal person sweats. I did sweat. Quietly. I said I do not invite strangers into my home at night. It was not an answer. It was a sentence, wearing a helmet. She smiled and stepped back. That was worse than anger. Anger leaves. A smile schedules follow-up. I closed the door and exhaled. My lungs had apparently been waiting for legal clearance. Han Seo-yoon said thank you from the kitchen. It was quiet, but it landed harder than applause. Outside, Hiram made a call. She had not found proof, but she had found interest. In media, interest is proof wearing casual clothes. The next morning, the agency held a crisis meeting. I was not invited, which was polite because I would have lowered the average suit price. Min-kyung called during breakfast. Apparently, scandals eat early. The agency wanted to deny everything by making me look suspicious. Han Seo-yoon refused before I could process being sacrificed again. I suggested telling the boring truth. I returned her wallet, helped her avoid reporters, and did not seduce a national icon in a stairwell. Min-kyung went silent. When frightening people go silent, either they are impressed or preparing paperwork. Han Seo-yoon asked what would happen to me. I appreciated the concern. I also disliked how much I appreciated it. I told her the public would get bored of me quickly. I have a decent face, only second to the viewer watching right now, but even that has limits. Han Seo-yoon almost smiled. I had not aimed for that. My mouth occasionally creates side effects. By afternoon, Han Seo-yoon recorded a statement. Her face was calm enough to make lying look unnecessary. I watched the statement at work. Tae-hoon watched me watching the statement. Our office had become a very small surveillance state. The internet reacted immediately. Some believed her, some did not. Many focused on my face, which was rude but statistically predictable. Tae-hoon said, people were calling me mysterious. This was incorrect. I was tired. My manager called me in again. At this rate, our relationship was progressing faster than mine with Han Seo-yoon. He told me to go home early. Finally, the company and I agreed on one thing. When I left the office, Hiram was across the street. This was becoming less like reporting and more like a subscription service. I did not run. Running confirms guilt. Also, as mentioned before, my cardio is not ready for broadcast. I changed my route 3 times. Hiram changed hers 3 times. This was not coincidence. This was cardio with journalism. I confirmed it through a window reflection. For once, my habit of avoiding direct eye contact became operationally useful. I entered a convenience store, bright lights, cameras, witnesses, the holy trinity of introvert safety. I bought toothpaste, rice, and extra towels. The scandal had entered the household supply phase. Hiram waited outside. She knew I knew. I knew she knew I knew. This is why I avoid people. I stepped outside and asked if she needed something. It was bold for me, which means my voice was almost normal. She offered to speak off the record. That phrase sounds trustworthy until you remember records are her profession. I told her I would not discuss someone else's fear for entertainment. It came out more serious than planned. For the first time, Hiram looked less like a reporter and more like a person hearing something inconveniently decent. Then, I left. A good line should be abandoned before the speaker ruins it. When I returned, Han Seo-yoon was waiting near the hallway. She tried to look casual. Her face disagreed. She asked if I was followed. Then she looked at me like she was checking for injuries. Being inspected by concern is difficult. I told her about High Rim. I kept the summary factual, because adding emotion felt like seasoning a fire. She apologized again. Seo-yoon apologized like someone who expected every kindness to become a debt. I told her to stop apologizing for needing help. The room became quiet in a way that made me suspect I had said something dangerous. She turned toward the window. I understood. Sometimes, the city is easier to look at than a person who saw you clearly. That night, I brought her to the rooftop. It was technically outside, but still within the building, a compromise between freedom and not getting eaten by cameras. She breathed like someone had finally given her permission to be made of lungs instead of headlines. I stood near the door and watched the stairwell. She noticed I was not watching her. That seemed to matter. She said her penthouse had a better view. Then, she said this rooftop was easier to breathe on. I imagined her penthouse, wide windows, expensive furniture, enough space to feel lonely in high definition. I did not know what to say, so I did not perform wisdom. Sometimes, silence is the only sentence, not lying. She told me she started acting young. She learned camera angles before she learned how to say she was tired. In my head, I saw a small girl surrounded by lights, being told to smile until smiling became muscle memory. She said people loved Han Seo-yoon, the actress, the face, the brand. She was not sure how many people had met the woman. I told her I had met the woman. She complained about cotton, spilled coffee in my kitchen, and nearly violated the door rule. She laughed, not the interview laugh, not the actress laugh, the dangerous kind. The kind that makes a quiet man consider lifestyle changes. I almost smiled. I stopped myself because self-control is important when your life is already being investigated. Then her phone rang. Romance like peace has poor timing. Min Kyung said Ryu Seon Woo had returned to Seoul. Seo-yoon's face changed before I understood why. I noticed the name mattered. I also noticed noticing bothered me. That was new and inefficient. Somewhere across the city, Ryu Seon Woo arrived under camera flashes. He looked like the kind of man scandals apologized to before touching. The next morning, every entertainment channel wanted Ryu's comment. Of course they did. Handsome men with history are media fertilizer. Taehoon explained that Ryu Seon Woo and Seo-yoon had once been called the nation's perfect couple. I did not ask. He considered that irrelevant. Old clips showed them under artificial rain, looking perfect together. Some people are designed for camera chemistry. I am designed for password resets. Taehoon asked if I was jealous. I said no. This was a clean answer with questionable structural integrity. At home, Seo-yoon watched Ryu's interview alone. The apartment was quiet enough to make the television feel rude. Ryu said he trusted Seo-yoon and hoped she was with someone who could protect her. The sentence was elegant. It also threw a chair into the rumor room. The internet decided his comment was romantic, tragic, threatening, and suspicious. The internet likes having range. Seo-yoon messaged me, had I seen it? I had. Unfortunately, my face had also seen it. I called her from an empty meeting room. It was the first time I called someone, because not calling felt worse. I told her I believed her, not the articles, not the comments, her. Then I said, I was worried because she was alone in my home. The sentence sounded normal until it reached my own ear. On the other end, she went quiet. I checked the connection. The connection was fine. The emotional network had failed. Then, High Rim appeared outside the meeting room. I began to suspect she had been raised by GPS. I ended the call quickly. If danger walks into the hallway, you do not leave someone you care about on speaker. High Rim said she knew this was bigger than a dating rumor. For once, her voice did not sound like a headline. She said, Chairman Baek was using all of us, and if I wanted to protect Seo-yoon, I had to hear the truth before the agency buried it. I disliked how believable she sounded. High Rim asked for 10 minutes. I did not want to give a reporter 10 seconds, but she had used Chairman Baek's name, and unfortunately, my curiosity passed background checks. I chose the glass meeting room, visible from outside, soundproof enough inside, a compromise between secrecy and not getting murdered by journalism. She placed a folder on the table. I did not touch it. In my experience, paper becomes dangerous when confident people carry it. Her first proof was a photo from a parking garage, 2 men. 1 envelope. Enough shadows to make morality leave the building. I looked at the evidence. My face stayed calm because faces are cheaper to control than consequences. High Rim said, Baek was not reacting to the scandal. He had arranged it. That sentence made the room colder. Chairman Baek had money, influence, and the relaxed posture of a man who outsourced guilt. The agency was not protecting Seo-yoon. It was protecting access. There is a difference, though both wear suits. Then she told me I was useful because I was ordinary. It was the first time my lack of celebrity became a tactical liability. I asked why she came to me instead of publishing everything. I was proud of the question. It sounded like something a person with survival instincts would ask. She said, if she published now, Seo-yoon would burn first, and Baek would vanish second. It was the first responsible thing I had heard from the media. So I opened my notebook. Some men fight with fists. I use bullet points. Please do not underestimate boring men with stationery. Hi, Rim watched me write, like she had discovered a filing cabinet with emotions. Before I left, I told her not to approach Seo-yoon directly. Rim asked if I was protecting her. I said, I was reducing variables. I called Min-jae. Her first word was not hello. It was my name in a tone that suggested legal consequences. When I said Bak's name, Min-jae went quiet. I was learning that powerful names can silence even frightening women. I returned home with groceries, my notebook, and information that made groceries feel emotionally inappropriate. We told Seo-yoon together. I thought that would make it easier. I was wrong. Bad news does not become lighter because it has multiple presenters. When she heard Bak's name, she did not look confused. She looked like someone had opened a locked room in her memory. She remembered a luxury event where Bakake had spoken to her like she was already property. The room had chandeliers. Apparently, evil appreciates lighting. She said, Bakik wanted her face attached to an investment group. Not her opinion, her face. Fame is sometimes just a signature other people rent. I told her being pressured is not the same as being guilty. She looked at me like I had handed her something she had not allowed herself to own. She did not answer. That was fine. Some sentences need time to find a safe place inside a person. Then, her phone rang. When she saw the caller, her hand stopped. My notebook suddenly became very interesting to me. She answered. I looked away. Respecting privacy is easy until your curiosity starts filing complaints. Ryu Seon-woo spoke from a hotel room, probably larger than my entire apartment floor. This was not jealousy. It was square footage, awareness. He asked to meet. Seo-yoon looked conflicted. I understood nothing, which did not stop my chest from forming opinions. I pretended not to listen. I stared at my notebook, so hard it may have developed trauma. She said, Ryu wanted to meet tomorrow. Her voice was neutral. Mine had not yet been tested. I said she should meet him if it helped. That was reasonable. Feelings dislike reasonable people. She looked at me for a long second. I felt inspected again, this time, not by a reporter. Then she said, come with me, not as a bodyguard, not as a witness. As her escort, my brain requested written clarification. I had been asked to be many things in life: team member, tenant, emergency contact. Never the public escort of a woman whose face paid rent in billboards. She explained the logic. If she met Ryu alone, the media would resurrect old rumors. If I joined, the new rumor would fight the old rumor. Apparently, scandal management is just rumor wrestling. Min-kyung approved. Then she gave me rules. Do not speak too much. Do not look scared. Do not hold her hand unless necessary. I wrote down, define necessary. Seo-yoon taught me how to walk under cameras. The first lesson was posture. I had posture. Technically, it was just apologetic. I stood straight, she said. I looked like I was waiting to guide guests to a conference hall. Then she stepped close and adjusted my shoulders. The lesson became less about posture and more about oxygen management. Her hand stopped near my chest for 1 second. 1 second is short in time, but long enough for a man to reconsider several beliefs. We stepped back at the same time, very mature, very synchronized, very suspicious. Next was hand placement. She explained it like safety training. I respected the professionalism, my pulse did not. I asked what contact she was comfortable with. She stared at me like I had spoken a rare dialect called basic respect. She said, holding her hand was okay if I asked first. My hand, which had done nothing wrong, suddenly felt unemployed. I asked if we should practice. Dear viewer, please do not learn romance from me. I turned hand-holding into a rehearsal schedule. We held hands for practice. The problem was that my nervous system did not understand the word practice. She looked at me while we held hands, not at the hand. At me, that was worse. Hands are easier to survive than eyes. I said her hand was cold and asked if she wanted tea. It was not romantic in my head. My head was once again unreliable. She laughed without letting go. This was the most dangerous version of laughter discovered so far. The next morning, Min-kyung sent clothes. They fit perfectly, which was unsettling. I do not like being measured by people I have not met. Seo-yoon came out looking like Han Seo-yoon again. My apartment looked embarrassed to be in the same frame. I stared for half a second, too long to be fair. She had entered the room looking like a national budget had been spent on elegance. She adjusted my tie. I looked at the wall behind her because walls do not make eye contact while standing that close. Before we left, I asked if I could hold her hand outside. She looked at me like I had made the performance harder to fake. We stepped outside together. Cameras flashed. I had never missed fluorescent office lighting so deeply. I held her hand, publicly. It looked natural. Privately, several departments inside my brain resigned. In the car, neither of us let go immediately. This was either method acting or a serious workplace boundary issue. Min-jae saw it in the mirror and said nothing. Her silence had subtitles. We let go at the same time. Very professional, very normal. Absolutely not suspicious to the woman watching us in the mirror. The meeting was at a luxury hotel. Of course it was. Famous people apparently discuss emotional damage near marble. I walked beside her through the lobby. My posture had improved. My soul was still using beginner settings. Reporters asked questions. We kept walking. I learned that ignoring people looks elegant when done beside a celebrity. Ryu Seon-woo waited in the private lounge like he had been born already edited. We entered together. Ryu looked at Seo-yoon first, then at me. His smile paused for one frame. I respected the technique. Ryu greeted me politely. I bowed politely. It was not a fight. It was two men weaponizing manners. We sat down. The seating arrangement had been chosen by fate, interior design, and emotional violence. Ryu asked if she was safe. He did not look at me when he asked. That was fair. I did not look like security. I looked like someone who alphabetizes receipts. Seo-yoon said she was safe because I helped her. My face remained calm. Internally, a small employee dropped a folder. Ryu looked at me properly, then, not angrily, worse, curiously. I introduced myself with my name and job. Nothing extra. Competing with actors in charm is how ordinary men become cautionary tales. Ryu said he wanted to help because old rumors about them were being revived. I listened, quietly, like a mature adult with internal weather. Then, Seo-yoon asked if Bak's people had contacted him. The room stopped pretending this was about romance. Ryu's smile faded. He was still handsome. Annoyingly, guilt also suited him. He admitted Baka's side had contacted him before the interview. His comment had not been accidental. It had been guided. Seo-yoon did not raise her voice. She only held her cup tighter. Sometimes anger is quiet because it is trying not to break anything. I asked him why he did it. The question was simple. Simple questions are rude when everyone has been decorating the truth. Ryu said Baek threatened his film and the people attached to it. Power rarely attacks the person alone. It attacks the chairs around them. Seo-yoon looked at me. I looked back. No words. For once, my lack of dialogue was useful. Ryu offered to help, then he warned the scandal would get worse before it got better. This was not comforting, but at least it was honest. When we left the lounge, reporters were waiting. Someone had leaked the meeting. The plot had upgraded from inconvenient to hostile. Before I could think, Seo-yoon took my hand. Not lightly, not for practice. In front of Ryu, reporters, and every camera in the lobby, she chose the roomer standing beside her. Seo-yoon took my hand in front of everyone. In private, hand-holding had required permission. In public, it became national policy. Her grip tightened. That told me two things. She was nervous, and my hand had been promoted from practice equipment to emotional support tool. Questions came from every direction. Lover, secret, boyfriend, Ryu, scandal. I missed questions with answer choices. Seo-yoon's face became calm. I had seen this version before. The actress had entered the room to protect the woman. She said, I was the person who helped her when she was scared. Not a stalker, not an opportunist. A person. I kept my face still. This was necessary because my feelings had started walking around without supervision. Then, Ryu stepped forward. I prepared for rivalry. He chose decency. Very inconvenient of him. Ryu said Seo-yoon owed no one an explanation for seeking safety. It was a good line. Annoyingly good. Seo-yoon looked grateful. I noticed. I also noticed that noticing made me less mature than planned. Then she looked back at me and did not let go. Dear viewer, I survived. Publicly, Min-chung appeared like a woman who had personally argued with chaos and won before breakfast. We walked through the cameras. Seo-yoon led slightly. I followed like a man being calmly processed by history. Behind us, Ryu watched. His expression was unreadable. Actors have an unfair advantage in emotional encryption. Inside the car, nobody spoke. Sometimes silence is not empty. Sometimes it is everyone checking for internal damage. Then she noticed we were still holding hands. This was becoming a recurring administrative failure. I asked if she wanted me to let go. She looked at me for a long second and said, not yet. By the time we reached the apartment, the internet had made a decision. We were tragic, suspicious, romantic, fake, real, and somehow well-matched. Back in apartment 403, we removed our shoes like normal people. It was important to perform normal behavior after becoming a national subplot. Seo-yoon sat down without taking off her coat. The actress had left the hotel. The woman had not yet found the strength to move. I brought water. I considered saying something comforting, but water had a better success record. She apologized for taking my hand without asking. I was impressed. Most people do not apologize to the furniture they are leaning on during earthquakes. I told her I understood. I also told her I was not uncomfortable. This was true, though incomplete in several dangerous directions. She asked, what part are you not saying? This woman was bad for my survival. She had started reading footnotes. I offered tea. This is known as tactical retreat with boiling water. She laughed, softly, tiredly, the kind of laugh that makes a room feel less rented. We checked the reactions together. This was a mistake. But humans have been making the same mistake since comment sections were invented. Some people called me mysterious. Some called me gentle. One person said I was handsome in a way that sneaks up after taxes. I chose not to investigate further. Seo-yoon said I was getting popular. I told her popularity is just surveillance with compliments. I admitted I have a decent face, obviously, still second to the viewer watching right now, but apparently decent had entered the public market. She smiled into her cup. I pretended not to see it. I had already caused enough problems with observation. Then, Ryu messaged her. The phone lit up with old history at a very inconvenient brightness. I did not ask. She noticed me not asking. This relationship had developed a dangerous amount of silent literacy. Chairman Baek also saw the footage. Unlike the internet, he did not call us cute. Powerful men rarely contribute wholesome engagement. Baek chose the easiest target. Not the actress, not the actor. Me. The ordinary man with a rental contract and limited emotional insurance. By morning, anonymous posts appeared. Suddenly, I was suspicious, ambitious, and apparently secretly trained in seducing celebrities. I would like to know when this training occurred. The next day, the office was different. People no longer stared openly, they stared politely. This was worse. Tae-hoon warned me the comments had turned ugly. He was serious, which made me miss his usual incompetence. My manager called me in again. At this point, the meeting room and I were practically dating. HR asked if I had used company resources to approach Han Seo-yoon. I said no. I found her wallet on a street. Apparently, that was too simple for adults. I answered calmly. Calm is useful. It is also very tiring when people keep mistaking it for guilt. They placed me on temporary leave. The wording was gentle, the meaning was not. I packed my bag while everyone pretended not to watch. Office people are skilled at pretending. It is how meetings survive. Tae-hoon gave me a drink and said to call if I needed anything. Men are simple. We say friendship through beverages. I left work early again. This time, not because I chose to. Freedom feels different when someone hands it to you in a sealed envelope. I told Min-jae. She went quiet again. I was starting to dislike silence from powerful women. Han Seo-yoon heard before I got home. By the time I opened the door, guilt had already arrived and taken off its shoes. She was waiting in the hallway, not like a celebrity, like someone expecting a sentence. She said she should leave before I lost more because of her. It was a logical sentence. I hated it immediately. I wanted to answer quickly. I did not. Quick answers are often emotions, wearing shoes. She said, her penthouse had security. My apartment had a door chain and optimism. This was difficult to dispute. I told her Bak wanted her isolated. I said this because it was true, also because I did not want her to leave. Both facts were inconvenient. She said, Bakik was hurting me because she stayed. The worst arguments are the ones with evidence. So, I opened my notebook. She looked offended. Fair, nothing ruins emotional sacrifice like documentation. She laughed once, then looked like she regretted it. People under pressure sometimes leak joy by accident. We made a plan. She would return to her penthouse publicly. The evidence work would continue quietly. Romance, if any, was not included in the agenda. She packed the clothes Min-jae brought, then paused over my hoodie. It was not expensive. It was not stylish. It had somehow become evidence. I told her she could keep it. It looked less unemployed on her. Compliments are safer when disguised as clothing criticism. She smiled. Not enough to fix anything. Enough to make the leaving worse. Min-kyung arrived with a route, a car, and the expression of someone who had already yelled at 3 people. At the door, we both became very interested in the floor. Goodbyes are easier when treated as interior design studies. I told her to message me when she arrived. It sounded ordinary. It did not feel ordinary. She said she would. Then she almost said something else. Whatever it was, it stayed with her. She looked back once. I raised my hand slightly. It was not dramatic. My hand has limited range. Then, apartment 403 became quiet again. The same quiet I used to like. It had changed owners. Han Seo-yoon returned to her penthouse. It had security, space, and furniture that looked too expensive to comfort anyone. Min-jae called to confirm she arrived. Her tone was professional, softer than usual, but still wearing armor. I sat at the table. Her mug was still there. A normal person would wash it. I chose to respect evidence. The apartment felt wrong, not empty. Wrong, there is a difference, and I disliked learning it. Online, people decided our separation proved we were fake. The internet is brave with other people's silence. Han Seo-yoon read the same thing alone. I knew because she typed for 3 minutes and sent nothing. The typing stopped. No message came. It was impressive how much nothing could say. So I put my phone down and worked. This was maturity, or cowardice wearing glasses. Chairman Baek heard she had left. He smiled. I was not there, but I am comfortable assuming rich villains smile near windows. After midnight, someone came to my building. Not a reporter. Too quiet. Too clean. Too employed by consequences. I heard a sound outside the door. My first thought was reporter. My second thought was worse. I approached the door carefully. Apartment 403 had returned to being quiet. It had not returned to being safe. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a suit. No camera, no microphone. That made him much worse. I sent Han Seo-yoon one message. Do not come here. Then, I regretted it immediately, because people in dramas ignore useful instructions. At her penthouse, Han Seo-yoon read the warning and stood up. This was predictable. I had just warned a woman with a history of walking into storms. Then, the doorbell rang, calmly, politely, like danger had learned manners. Midnight. Threat. Quiet. intimidation, verbal, standoff, controlled threat, disguised as offer, ordinary,